Inuyashiki is a show I was really interested to watch, as I read a few chapters of the manga and found myself really captivated by both the art and the premise of the story. It's an interesting, albeit dark anime about a lonely old man whose family doesn't respect him. Even when he gets cancer, they don't slow down to ask him how he's doing because they're a bunch of selfish, entitled dickheads. When he goes for a walk with his dog, some weird alien explosion transforms his body into a mechanical one, and he gets crazy, incomprehensible superpowers that completely cure him of his cancer and make him feel immortal. He involuntarily uses his powers to punish a bunch of hoodlums assaulting an old man and doxes them for all the world to see. He then finds out there's another person out there who has these same exact powers and is using them for evil, and there's a lot of violence as is expected from most seinen anime. From this point on, I'm going to issue a spoiler warning, but trust me when I say you won't really be missing much if you end up choosing to watch all 11 episodes. It follows the manga to a T, despite the downgrade in artistic fidelity being so drastic that you'll wish you could temporarily experience acute blindness just to spare yourself from the abomination the show likes to generously cite as animation direction. Although we can all agree that the OP is fucking bangin'. Inuyashiki is a show that had a really cool premise and interesting, mostly atypical characters, all wrapped up in a neat little dramatic package that I really wanted to like. I don't know about you, but I'm sick of all these handsome, well-groomed whippersnappers hogging all the fame. We need to get more geriatric representation, goddammit. Of all the uninspired concepts that it set out to execute, it has a bunch of edgy stuff that caught my attention, like indiscriminate violence and male-on-male rape. Wait, that came out wrong. To briefly condense the totality of the story, Inuyashiki gets his powers and uses them for good, while the young sociopath Shishigami gets his powers and uses them for evil. They fight sometimes and nothing really happens. Shishigami continues to get limited character development and extensive screen time despite him being extremely two-dimensional. Then when a giant meteorite threatens to destroy the planet, Shishigami decides to take a break from murdering everyone and decides to be the good guy because plot. And Inuyashiki decides he wants to be the hero too. So after Inuyashiki pushes Shishigami's eye explosion button and he does some damage to the meteorite, he realizes he has no choice but to do it himself and destroy the remainder of the meteorite, thereby saving the world. The end. If you're upset at me for bashing this pig trow of a plot, do me a favor and fly to the moon and stay there, because the world will be a lot better off without your terrible taste. The main problem with the show is its complete lack of focus and its really weak cast. When I saw that the main character Ichiro Inuyashiki was a kind, unassuming person who was also played by the older actor Fumio Kohinata undertaking his first voiced anime role, I really enjoyed his character. That is, until it becomes apparent that he's going to take a backseat to all the other unlikable and uninteresting characters. You have Hiro Shishigami, the antagonist that closely resembles Death Note's Light Yagami if he had antisocial personality disorder, and the narrative depth of a young child's inflatable swimming pool, spends the entirety of the show becoming an aimless psychopath, who upon transforming into a machine, decides he'll start murdering everyone because fuck it. You have Shishigami's close childhood friend Naoyuki Ando, an otaku shut-in that's often on the receiving end of bullying and ends up getting roped into Shishigami's crimes before eventually getting fed up and completely cutting ties to team up with Inuyashiki for the remainder of the show. There's Shion Watanabe, a young girl who has a crush on Shishigami before realizing he's a genocidal murderer and quickly changes her mind, as well as Shishigami's mom, who's basically just a plot device who ends up killing herself once she learns her son is Kira. Oh fuck, that's the wrong show. Which justifies his vengeance-driven murdering spree and attempts to humanize him as a tragic character with whom the viewer is meant to empathize. Of the three characters I just mentioned, they all have heavy involvement with Shishigami, and that's really a missed opportunity. I also wish the dog got more development because she's one of the strongest characters, being a dog and everything. Inuyashiki's daughter Mari is a huge bitch throughout most of the show, but the moment she realizes her dad is basically the Pope if he was also a Gundam, she experiences a complete 180 and becomes a really affectionate character that the show once again attempts to push on the viewers, despite having no traits other than wanting to be a manga artist. The audience is never given a legitimate reason to care about any of these characters aside from the protagonist due to his philanthropic nature and heroic intentions, and the only way anyone could realistically identify with Shishigami is if they grew up in an emotionally negligent household and had edgy thoughts about murdering anyone who was ever mean to them. And if that description speaks to you watching this video, let me tell you, that's probably not a good character to be rooting for, and you should look into therapy. Part of me got a kick seeing Shishigami walk into a crowd and open fire with his imaginary machine gun as he made annoying da-da-da-da-da-da sounds with his mouth, and it was pretty clear from the delivery that the studio wasn't taking the show incredibly seriously. But at the same time, Inuyashiki's premise and overarching super serious, gritty tone makes me wonder if this was actually just incidental. There's a lot of grim concepts and emotional responses that beg the viewer to not just take the show seriously, but to genuinely feel anxiety about these characters' states of being. You'll see a scene where a happy, unassuming girl working at a bakery ends up getting engaged to a young, sheepish man. Everything seems happy, and suddenly she gets kidnapped and forced to take drugs where it's implied she'll be sexually assaulted. She manages to get out of there and return to her fiancé, who limply hugs her, and suddenly, bam, they get invaded by the bad guys. And while the fiancé tries pleading with them to pay them a ransom, when he manages to get the money, the head honcho just chokes him out and kills him while his fiancé is sobbing and trying to get him to stop. Later, Inuyashiki shows up and frantically attempts to bring him back to life, and that's where the show's pattern of using tears and emotions to manipulate you becomes apparent. So there are these things called mirror neurons. They're a bit confusing and not entirely understood by neuroscientists, but the most widely accepted theory is that they allow you to feel a deep sense of empathy. If you see someone crying in a movie, or if you feel how angry the main character is when he's plotting revenge, you might identify with that emotion and take it on yourself. In other words, they cry, you feel sad. They get angry, you want to see them get justice and feel better. The show utilizes that a lot. You may not care about most of these characters, but the show makes you think you do by showing them reacting with a lot of emotions, relying on the expectation that the viewer is a decent person who cares about the suffering of others, in order to give you a sense of investment in the hopes that the conflict will resolve itself accordingly. As a result, this show confuses the shit out of me. It takes itself really seriously the vast majority of the time, but at the same time you have scenes like this. One thing I will admit to really enjoying is the brutality of Inuyashiki's world. I'm a very cynical person, especially as I've gotten older and realized the true ugliness of the world and those who inhabit it while masquerading as kind people. There's a particular realism that it carries with it, and it's that same bold, unapologetic quality that draws me to the seinen genre in particular. Reprising my earlier comments about the animation, I want to say up front that I'm not one of those rabid anime fans that sees 3D and immediately shits their pants. I don't know the first thing about studio animation, budgets, or time constraints relating to them, but I know there have been a growing amount of shows that rely on this visual style much to the show's detriment, and this will probably be another one for the changed for the worse corkboard. But much like microtransactions and season passes in video games, this is a trend that almost certainly isn't going anywhere. It would seem that the studio either rushed Inuyashiki out as fast as it could, or knew the lukewarm reception the manga experienced meant it would be in their best interest to churn out the animation as cost effectively as possible. But geez, do some of these 3D effects look terrible. Nothing like the amazing quality of the manga's hand-drawn art to juxtapose high-definition renders of an old man's saggy jowls. And all it takes is a weird, emaciated-looking antagonist screaming at the heavens to make me emit an audible chuckle. Whoa, look at this intense scene. I can't wait to see how the fight will go. Okay, they're literally superimposing CG graphics directly on top of 2D layers. Yeah, no, it looks great. Really good. I mean, frankly, I like the scene in the manga where the doctors tried using needles on Inuyashiki, but because he was a robot, they kept breaking. They probably would have kept that in the anime if needles weren't delicate things that needed to be hand-drawn. Dog is basically the only character in this show that looks good in 3D. Did I mention I like Dog? Dog for president. I really liked the premise of this anime and I wanted to enjoy it, but it just fell so flat for me. I don't think it's the worst anime ever made, and I wish it did a lot more with the protagonist because he really is a lovable, believable character. But the show spends too much time jerking off over Egami that no other character gets any reasonable amount of spotlight. If I were to rate Inuyashiki in terms of how much I enjoyed it, I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. But unfortunately, I need to take every aspect of the show into consideration, not just the guilty pleasures. Also, Donald Trump appears in this anime.
The rest of you losers can go do whatever the hell you want.
It's a pretty good impression, actually. 6 out of 10.